Up next on Outlook, redefining America's workforce, what it means to be a worker in today's economy. From an on-demand workforce to gig workers to right-to-work issues, we're going to share a conversation on trending labor issues. And later in the show, a labor of love for your spring garden. Outlook is next. Stay with us. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're glad you joined us. You know, there's an epidemic spreading throughout America's workforce. In the changing landscape, there's a lot of knowledge, lots of talent, but guess what? Not a lot of jobs, and a lot of changing faces, changing landscape for what's happening in the labor force. We're going to talk about that as we welcome to the program Dr. Daniel Meyers, who's with WKU's Economics Department, representing the Gordon Ford College of Business. Thanks for being here, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about, in your opinion, you know, it is a changing landscape, but if you had to identify one of the major challenges facing our labor force today, what is it?
The labor market has changed significantly in that 40, 50, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when a worker went to work for a job, that was a job that they kept for a long time. And today, jobs are more transient and the workers are more transient. Employers have found that it's a little bit cheaper not to have someone as an employee for them, and they don't have to pay as much money towards benefits and things like that. So they've started doing more contract work, independent contractors, and then we've seen a rise in the internet allowing us to do that a little bit better if in a less formal setting.
I want to talk more about that in a minute, but if you were to make a prediction, or is it your opinion that we will never go back to that time where you spent 27 years with a company, got a pension, got a retirement? Are those days gone?
Not really. For certain types of jobs, that's what we should expect.
Like what? Give me a for instance.
Teachers are going to be like that.
Okay.
You know, you go, you teach, you stay with a school,
Police
you stay
work.
with the school system, police, firefighters, and things like that. And what we find is that those are the people that have the strongest ties to their jobs, and we also find that those are the people who today are the strongest people with unions as well. So
interesting.
But as we have shifted from a manufacturing economy towards a service economy, then the need to have someone there year after year after year is not as great as it was before, and individuals don't see as much benefit. We have changed the way that the employer works with them. We've seen a change in the way we do pensions. At one time when we had pensions, they were designed to encourage a worker to stay with the company, and today it's...
You don't want them to stay
right.
with the company.
So we've moved to 401k type,
right.
type pensions that I can pick up and go wherever I want, whenever I want, and I don't lose by leaving this company.
Transient. So how do we compare with internationally on the global scene? Because I know many countries, like Germany, for example, right. You know, once you get into a place, into a position, you stay there, and it's an honor. It's a cultural honor, if you will, to stay in that position.
Well, again, this is a new thing for us. I don't think it's that much different in that there are lots of places where we have day laborers. It's a day labor type thing. You know, you go. You work for somebody until that job's finished, and then you move on. So, but we're seeing it more and more today with professionals and independent contractors. But then we're seeing it with people who are supplementing their income by driving for Uber, or a stay-at-home mom that wants to do something, working with Jackrabbit. You know, doing odd jobs, running errands for people and things.
So is this, what you're alluding to is, like you say, what we used to call the day laborer.
Right.
You know, where you could go and just work for a day, or a freelancer. So now the new term, I guess, is the gig worker, if you will. And why do we call them that?
I would say my first group on that is that it's sort of like a band would get a gig.
Yep.
You go, you did it, and you're done with it. Mm-hmm. Another possibility, as we discussed earlier, is the fact that to a large degree, this at least at the professional level, this arose out of the computer market. So
Okay.
people would take special programming jobs or come in and write certain software, and once they're done, they're gone. So I think both of those are the same. And we've seen day laborers now move from jobs that don't require extreme skills and extreme levels of education. Although many of the people who do things for me that would be day labor have skills much greater than I can, in carpentry and things like that. But to the more educated, the people who in the past were career people. So it's day laborers for white collar workers.
So that's an interesting way to look at it. So supply and demand, right?
Correct.
You've got the supply, you've got the demand, but this day laborer, this gig worker, it's is it going to be enough? Is it going to be enough? Because there are pros and cons, right? The
Correct.
pros are you have the freedom to go and do what you want to do. You can decide when you want to work, and it's not limited to one cohort, is it?
Correct. You could see retired people coming in that want to get out of the house. The wife or husband says, "Leave me alone for a while." Okay, I'll go drive,
Okay.
or I'll go do odd jobs for somebody. And with technology, with change in our way of doing things, we match up a lot easier now.
Are you saying this is like before we got started, he was talking about how similar this is to the dating sites because you match up.
Correct.
You got to match up.
And you put in characteristics of what you're looking for. Like with Uber, the drivers are out there and you match with them, there's somebody in your area and you go. With odd jobs with Jackrabbit, I don't think we have it here, but other places, you say I need somebody to come in and mulch my garden. Well, here in Bowling Green, I know who to call and say, Alex, come over and help me mulch, or Antonio, come help me mulch.
Right.
But there you say, I need somebody to mulch my garden in New York City, and somebody says, hey, here's what I'm going to charge, and poof, we're happy. So you don't have to put an ad in the newspaper like we did before. You don't have to put a flyer down at the grocery store and hope somebody comes and sees it. So it's an instant matching type thing.
But it's good for the person looking for that flexibility, hoping to make a little bit more money. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's like an employment agency of sorts, but you don't have the costs involved with going through an employment agency.
Correct. Let's say that I drive for Uber.
Okay.
Because that's something we know a little bit more about. Uber takes their commission off of what I do. After that, I get the money. Uber does not take out my income taxes. So come the end of the year, or come April 15th, I have to put
Uncle
aside
Sam.
enough to pay my percentage there, as well as an independent contractor, as an entrepreneur. I have to pay the entire share of my Social Security taxes. So I have to pay what I would have if I'd been working for a company, but I have to pay exactly that same amount on top because the employer matches what the employee takes in or pays.
So pros and cons. We're going to talk a little bit more about this and the status of right to work when Outlook continues with Dr. Dan Myers right after this. Stay with us. Outlook continues. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're so glad you joined us. On the program today, around the conversation, we're talking about labor trends. And something that we're seeing a lot of course, is a changing labor force. And joining us to discuss that topic is Dr. Dan Myers with WKU's Economics Department. Let's recap a little bit for someone who might just be joining us. Yes, it's no surprise. The labor force is changing. A lot of people don't even talk about an employee anymore. So the freelance market is opening up?
Yes, and one thing that number one, we don't have a handle on how large a segment of the workforce this is because it's difficult to gather that information, and it's such a new phenomenon. And number two, most of the laws that were written to help employees do not pertain to these people because they always say wage and salary people, and these are no longer wage and salary people. These are independent contractors. So we're looking to, people are talking about how this might affect public policy in the future, and do we need to make changes to how we do things so that these people have some type of protection. They don't have protection for overtime pay. They don't have unemployment benefit or unemployment insurance paid out of their money. They don't have disability insurance. They don't have.
Wait, as you're saying this, you see what's happening? You know, we're going back in time to the years when unions had to be formed to help protect a worker.
Correct. So that's one thing, and some of the literature I was reading before we started talking talked about what would a union look like for gig workers. You know, it's sort of like we have the industrial unions, and we have unions that, like in the United Auto Workers, where
Sure.
all people who work for a certain company or a certain industry join together. And then we got the trade unions like the plumbers, things along those lines. So if you're going to see this, it's probably going to be more likely to come up with a trade union type situation. But the trade unions wield their power when they go to Congress or to the state legislature and say, we need to restrict who can do this. We need to make sure everyone's licensed. We need to have these types of regulations.
Sure, they're not going to want
Right.
these gig workers.
Right.
And if you're just joining us, when we make that reference to a gig worker, basically what we're talking about is someone who does freelance work.
Correct.
Day laborers. And so we're seeing an emergence in this field. And in your opinion, with what you do with the Gordon Ford College of Business as an economist, do you think it's a good idea, or good, bad, doesn't matter, it's reality?
Yes. Don't you love it when yes
Yeah.
is not the appropriate answer?
Yeah, but it is, isn't it?
For some people, it's very good. For the employer, it's a great thing because they take a lot of liability and a lot of costs off themselves. For some of the workers, it's a good thing because I have a lot of flexibility. It's the workers that are doing this because they are somehow not able to do what they wanted to do or what they did in the past. So as people's skills atrophy, as the economy changes, and we don't need bookkeepers or people that do certain things as much as we did before. Either we have to have people whose skills catch up with the economy, or they do things that don't require skills.
That don't require skills. You know, there was Peter Drucker back in the late 50s wrote a book, Landmarks of Tomorrow, and he called what we're seeing, the reality of what's happening right now, knowledge work.
Correct.
Okay, we've got a lot of really skilled, a lot of people who, when the recession hit, the most recent one, they went back to school. I'll
Yes.
just get educated. So now we have this labor pool that's extremely educated, very knowledgeable, but they don't necessarily have the skill set to do jobs that certain employers require.
Or they are not in the place that those skill sets are being desired too. So for everything to kind of get to a happy equilibrium point, we have to have some mobility of workers, mobility of jobs, but that's not instantaneous. So,
Do we have a disparity in skilled workers and labor, in your opinion? And I'm not talking about, you know, you'd have to look geographically for specifics on that, but in
Correct.
general, are we meeting those needs?
we hear all the time that the universities are not putting out the people that businesses need,
Right, right.
and that we need to change the way we're doing things. The governor said we shouldn't train French literature people, but we should train more engineers. So the business people, you tell you one thing. So yeah, there are things that we are not, at least locally, we don't have the people with the skills. There are two ways to do that. One is to change the way we train people and educate people to have those skills, or that knowledge base. I guess some skills you can't teach; they're just arts. And another way is to make sure that the people that we do train stay here, or we're able to attract people from other places.
Hence the brain drain that we hear so much about. We educate them, we get them going, and then they leave. So training these workers, so career workers used to go in and they could offer something to a new person coming
Correct.
through because they had the years of experience. Like you said, sometimes you can't teach those skills, it's just an art.
Correct.
With more and more career jobs going by the wayside, are we going to lose that important connection?
There are two things that work there too, and as individuals who worked career jobs for an employer felt they had some type of job protection. You know, as I have seniority, I have this relationship with the company, they're not going to get rid of me. I'm more likely to help somebody else learn things. If I think that they're going to bring someone in and they're going to take my job, I'm not going to deal
Right.
with them as well. So as the economy changes, as the way we do things change, and we probably see that as we have less union representation than we did before as well, because that's one of the things that when we looked at studies that talked about how unionization affected productivity and profitability, one of the things they mentioned is that informal training was much more likely when people had some type of job security.
Interesting. Speaking of job security and an issue that is affecting labor forces all across the country, it's the right to work issue, and especially in Kentucky and Warren County. Help us fill us in on what we mean when we say right to work, and then where Warren County became one of the leaders across the country.
Okay.
Help us understand that.
Through time, I'm not going to do the whole history. Through
Okay.
time, workers had no rights at all, and legally they became granted more and more and more rights. Primarily the right to collective bargaining, to get together, to work as one when they're going to the employer. As things progressed, probably a little too much power was in the hands of the worker, and the government started trying to rein in some of the things. So in 1947, as part of the Taft-Hartley Act, the National Labor Relations Act, they allowed states to pass a law that said that we cannot, that an employer and a union cannot have a contract that requires a worker to become a union member.
Okay.
And the law had changed as well since then, and people who object to being a union member are allowed to pay only the portion of the union dues that goes towards collective bargaining. So they don't have to pay for political types of things that the union
That
does.
the union might do.
Only for the benefits they're receiving.
That they receive.
But now with the right to work law, it says that while the union cannot refuse to represent me as an individual when they do collective bargaining because it's everybody's represented, I can refuse to pay even that portion that goes to collective bargaining if we have a right to work law.
Okay, as it stands in the state of Kentucky, U.S. District Court ruled so-called right-to-work ordinances cannot be adopted at the local level. Warren County was the first in Kentucky to adopt a local ordinance.
Correct.
So then advocates say that the law is going to make more jobs. It's going to be more attractive to businesses to locate here. Opponents say they're designed to crush labor unions, lower wages. So where do we stand on this issue? You mentioned West Virginia just passed a state
Correct.
right-to-work
West
law.
Virginia, I think it was the 22nd or somewhere around there in February of this year, enacted, and the governor signed into law a right to work law. So I think Wisconsin and Michigan were in 2015, Indiana was 2013, and before that it was the 1960s.
So where's it
we've
going?
had researchers. Not sure.
Not sure.
Not sure. And what
And
we
are you
did,
surprised that in this current legislative session, we haven't heard more about it?
the bill, Senate Bill 3, is in the legislature. It's in committee right now.
Just in committee.
And historically, what has happened, at least since we had a Republican Senate and a Democratic House, is that it comes out of the Senate, goes to the House, and it dies in committee. So I think it will probably come out of committee sometime.
Okay.
That committee has only brought 2 bills out of committee to this point as well. So it's just part of the churning. And I think last year it was one of the first bills that they brought out of committee. So we'll just see where it goes from there. But with the situation with the counties here, and I'll get back to that just for a second. And usually the House, which is Democratic majority, doesn't let it go any further than that. And before, when we had a governor who was a Democrat, even if it had come out of both houses, he would likely have vetoed it. So we're in a different political landscape, and we might
So
see it
we might
before long.
see some action on that.
Right.
Well, we need to wrap up our segment here, but I leave us with some words of wisdom. If you've been watching this program and maybe you're just getting ready to enter the workforce or you're at the tail end of your career, is there light for the worker?
There's always light.
Okay. There's always light. We'll leave it at that. And speaking of light and love, we weren't talking about love, but we'll talk about a labor of love, and that's your spring garden. When we come back, we're going to find out more about what's ahead. Stay with us. Outlook continues. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're glad you joined us. In the first couple of segments, we were talking about trending labor issues, and then we want to move into a labor of love as spring approaches in these parts. What can we look forward to? Meteorologists recently reported a record level of snow in the region over this past winter. How will that affect our spring planning? We welcome to the program Rickman Freeman, who joins us, as well as Dennis Williams. Both bear the title horticulturists, and they're currently working with the Baker Arboretum in Bowling Green. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, immediately when you hear record levels of snow and you think about the flooding and underground, the stuff we can't see, how's that going to affect what we plant this spring?
Actually, snowfall is better than rainfall because it has a little bit more of your minor elements,
Really?
a lot of nitrogen, and it melts slowly into the ground and doesn't run off as badly as just a rainstorm. So actually, and it really protects, say, like you have a wheat crop, it's one of the best things in the world because it preserves it, it insulates it. And actually, snow is, I think, is a blessing in disguise.
Good to know, right? Because initially you would think, nope, not going to be a good idea. So talk about this region of the country and what grows best as we look ahead to spring.
We have a lot of, at the Arboretum, we have a lot of conifers, Japanese maples. They put on a really good show in the spring and the fall. Conifers are great for year-round. Kentucky is known for tomatoes, corn, things like that.
Conifers, what is a conifer? It's a fun name, and I know at least at the Baker Arboretum it is known for its conifers. But
Most people would know of it as your pine trees, your spruces.
Your evergreens.
Evergreens.
Oh, okay.
But we have a lot of rare ones, Camasiferous, from different countries that are really nice.
Did you notice how, Dennis, when you were talking about that, you said that they put on a good show in the spring? And isn't that what it really
That's
is
what
all
it's all
about?
about.
The aesthetics,
Yes.
the beauty of what we're planting? So there's also a lot of red buds in these parts.
They are really prolific in that area at the Baker Arboretum. And it is our hope and dream someday we want to have a Redbud Festival someday soon there at the Baker Arboretum. And our chairman, Dr. Stone, wanted me personally to invite you out this spring to come see.
Come see those red buds at the Baker Arboretum.
And we have such an extensive collection, so much beautiful color.
Well, the late Mitchell Leichhardt was instrumental, of course, in making that place a reality along with Jerry Baker, and it is beautiful if you haven't seen it. But as horticulturists, as you look at what's out there, how can we be greener gardeners, okay? And what I mean by that is be more sustainable, do better things. You mentioned Kentucky's known for its tomatoes. Maybe grow more vegetables?
I think so. Support your local farmers markets. If you don't have a garden, recycle is one thing that we're trying to do. You can collect rainwater.
Let me ask you about that, because I see a lot of these devices, if you will, coming out of the drain of houses, going into this big bucket, and that's collecting rainwater.
It is. You can have, as you see, like a barrel on a house, or some people have like a cistern, and it'll collect, and you can use that when you have dry weather.
So during the summer months in
Absolutely.
August, when water is a scarcity, or if you live in California,
Like San Diego, yes.
Yes, water is an issue. So collect the rainwater.
Yes.
Let Mother Nature give back.
And we did a better program this year at the Arboretum, composting the leaves and reincorporating them in the soil.
Using it as a sort of a mulch.
It's
of
a
sorts?
mulch.
Okay.
And we call it like it's like gold to us. And we reincorporate it into the soil, and it is just fabulous.
What a great idea. You know, as we're talking about spring planting, the two of you also wanted to share the fact that every year the Builders Association of Kentucky has a home expo, and they open up the lobby of their event to a nonprofit to decorate. And this year the Baker Arboretum has received that honor. Yes. So what can we expect the March 4th through 6th at the expo? What are we going to see?
We're going to bring a variety of the plants that we have at the Arboretum, a lot of the conifers. We've actually got some Japanese maples that we have forced by putting in a greenhouse so you can see the beautiful leaves that you would see in the springtime. Kind of a garden show, like a patio, or what you would expect to see at the Arboretum.
We've adopted the name this year of Garden Party.
Okay.
And it goes back to the
kind of a theme.
Kind of our theme, and we've using a 1973 hit by Rick Nelson. That's our Garden Party song.
Went to a garden party.
Went to a garden party, and working with the museum, we'll have some of the artwork displayed in this garden party.
Oh, so there'll be artwork as well.
There'll be artwork as well.
Lots of fun things.
And we're trying to engineer it and design it where it's going to be real inspiring. And the way I want to do it, I'm using a lot of material that we have grown there on property, but we're doing floral arrangements with it, and just, you know, just the inspiration part of it.
Speaking of the inspiration part of it, because that's a great way to lead this segment, get out and experience nature.
Yes.
Do you think people take it for granted?
I think so.
But you're at the Arboretum every day, and you get to see people experience that.
It's just a little piece of heaven, that place, and it's just a treasure. And both Dennis and I work with some incredible people, and the way it was designed is a wonderful place to train people, inspire people.
And just, if nothing else, just to go out there and enjoy the beauty that Mother Nature has given us. Thanks for sharing that story. We've been talking with Rickman Freeman and Dennis Williams. That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're glad you joined us. I was going to say, get out and take